You crack through your shell and blink into the blinding light of the world for the very first time, expecting something warm, something welcoming, maybe even someone. Instead, there's nothing. No comforting presence, no protective parent hovering nearby. Your mom laid the egg, did her part, and left. You never met her, and at this point, you're starting to realize you never will. Dodo parenting isn't exactly known for its emotional depth or long-term commitment, which means everything from this moment forward is entirely on you. You lie there for a second, damp, confused, and not particularly impressive, before instinct nudges you into action. Standing seems like a good place to start, although your legs strongly disagree with that idea. They wobble under your weight like two poorly constructed sticks, and your first few attempts end with you face planting directly into the dirt. It's not graceful, it's not encouraging, but eventually, through sheer stubbornness or luck, you manage to stay upright for more than a few seconds at a time. Once you're up, you take a few uncertain steps forward, your tiny, useless wings flapping instinctively to keep you balanced. They don't help much, but they make you feel like you're doing something, which is close enough. The ground around you is scattered with unfamiliar objects, and after a moment of hesitation, you peck at a soft-looking berry. It bursts instantly, sweet and messy, and just like that, you figured out your first essential skill. Eating. It isn't elegant, and it certainly isn't smart, but it works. You walk, you eat, and somehow, that seems to be enough. For now. A few weeks pass, and somehow, against all odds, you're still alive, which already feels like an achievement worth celebrating if you had any concept of celebration. Your legs, once determined to betray you at every step, have grown sturdier, and while you still wobble a little, you no longer collapse every few seconds like a poorly assembled structure. Walking has gone from a constant struggle to something closer to a habit, and with that comes a quiet sense of confidence you didn't earn, but are happy to enjoy anyway. The island quickly reveals itself to be less of a challenge and more of an all-you-can-eat buffet. Everywhere you look, there's food. Berries hang low from bushes, seeds scatter across the ground, and roots sit conveniently buried just shallow enough for you to peck and pull free without much effort. You don't need strategy, you don't need planning, and you definitely don't need speed. All you really need is to notice something edible before you accidentally step on it. At some point, you discover a particularly strange habit that feels questionable but oddly effective. You start swallowing small rocks. They don't taste like anything, and if you were capable of critical thinking, you might question why you're doing this at all. But soon enough, you realize your stomach handles tougher food better afterward, and that's all the confirmation you need. Logic isn't required when results are good enough. Every now and then, you run into other young dodos wandering through the same endless supply of food. These encounters are underwhelming. You both stop, stare at each other for a moment like you're waiting for something meaningful to happen, and then, when nothing does, you simply move on. Occasionally, one of you lets out a random squawk, not as communication, but more as a reflex, and that seems to be the full extent of your social structure. Cooperation,
Squawk.
friendship, or even mild curiosity about one another never really develops. Life settles into a simple, predictable loop. You wake up, you walk, you eat, and when that becomes tiring, you stop and rest wherever you happen to be. There are no threats chasing you, no competition pushing you, and no reason to think beyond your next meal. It's not exciting, it's not impressive, but it's easy. And for a dodo, easy is more than enough. By the time you're close to a year old, you've grown into something solid, round, and surprisingly confident for a creature that has never faced a real problem. The awkward hatchling phase is long behind you, replaced by a steady routine that feels almost efficient. Your days follow a simple structure. In the morning, you search for food. In the afternoon, you rest. And by evening, you wander off to eat again, just in case you somehow missed something earlier. It isn't ambitious, but it works, and you've stopped questioning it. You've even developed a kind of expertise, if that word isn't too generous. You can spot the ripest berries without much effort, instinctively choosing the softest, sweetest ones, while ignoring anything that looks even slightly inconvenient. Every so often, you still swallow a small rock or two, not because you enjoy it, but because your body seems to appreciate the gesture. It's a strange system, but then again, everything about you is a little strange, and that hasn't caused any problems so far. Your wings, however, remain a consistent disappointment. You flap them occasionally out of habit, stirring up dust and not much else, and at some point, You quietly accept that flying is simply not part of your future. Fortunately, that realization doesn't come with any real consequences. Everything you need is already on the ground, and you've never felt the urge to go anywhere particularly far. Exploration for you means wandering a slightly different path through the same forest and feeling mildly accomplished for doing so. Still, there are moments when something feels off. It's not a clear thought, more like a faint itch in the back of your mind that you can't quite reach. The island is quiet, but it's always been quiet, so you're not entirely sure why it suddenly feels different. Sometimes you pause, looking around at the trees and the empty stretches between them, as if expecting something to change, though you have no idea what that might be. One morning, as you wander along your usual route, you notice something unusual on the horizon. The water, which is normally empty and uninteresting, now holds strange shapes. Large, wooden, and moving slowly toward the shore. You stare for a moment, unsure what you're looking at, then tilt your head slightly as if that might help. Whatever they are, they don't seem to be bothering you yet. So after a brief pause, you return to what you do best, finding something to eat. At first, you don't think much of the strange wooden shapes drifting closer to the island. They sit on the water like oversized, awkward birds that forgot how to move properly, and after a brief moment of curiosity, you go back to eating. Whatever they are, they don't immediately interfere with your routine, and that's usually enough for you to lose interest. That changes the moment they reach land. The creatures that step off them are unlike anything you've ever seen. They move loudly, clumsily, yet with a strange sense of purpose, stomping across the ground as if they already own it. They carry long sticks, pile things together, and before long you see something new. Fire. Bright, flickering, and completely unnatural, it crackles and spreads warmth into the air. You tilt your head, watching with quiet fascination, unsure if this is dangerous or just another oddity you don't fully understand. One of them notices you. He approaches, slow but direct, and you do what you've always done when faced with something unfamiliar. You stand still and watch. Nothing in your life has ever tried to hurt you before, so there's no reason to assume this will be any different. You blink, waiting for something to happen, but not preparing for it. By the time you realize this might not be a harmless interaction, it's already too late. He grabs you. Just like that, you're lifted off the ground, your legs kicking uselessly in the air, while your wings flap in a panic that achieves absolutely nothing. One moment you are calmly eating, and the next, you're dangling like an overripe piece of fruit. This is the exact moment you learn two very important things. First, these creatures are not your friends, and second, you are nowhere near as fast or capable as you thought you were. You're eventually dropped, more out of disinterest than mercy, and you scramble away as quickly as your body allows, your heart pounding in a way it never has before. For the first time in your life, something lingers in your mind that isn't food or rest. It's fear. Over the following days, the island begins to change in ways you can't ignore. The creatures cut down trees, tear apart the ground, and fill the air with constant noise. Worse, they don't come alone. Smaller, faster animals spread through the forest, raiding nests, stealing eggs, and devouring anything they can find. Larger ones trample plants and dig up the roots you once relied on. Then one day you see it happen. Another dodo, one you vaguely recognize, is caught. He struggles, flaps, makes sounds you've heard before but never understood like this. This time, they mean something. You watch as he's carried away, and later from a distance you hear the noises. Sharp, final, followed by silence. A smell drifts through the air, unfamiliar but unmistakable once it settles in your mind. They're eating him. And just like that, your world, once simple and predictable, is gone. From that point on, survival stops being simple and starts becoming something you barely understand how to do. The forest that once felt endless now feels smaller, thinner, like it's quietly disappearing around you. Food is no longer everywhere. You walk longer, search harder, and sometimes still come up with nothing more than a few wilted leaves or a half-rotten berry that you would have ignored before. Now you eat it anyway. You begin to notice the silence, not the calm, familiar quiet you grew up with, but something heavier. The occasional shapes of other dodos become rarer, then almost non-existent. Days pass without a single squawk, without that awkward moment of standing near another bird and doing absolutely nothing together. It turns out that even meaningless company was still company. You spend more time hiding than eating, pressing your body into bushes that barely conceal you, hoping not to be seen. It works sometimes. Other times you hear distant movement and freeze completely, relying on stillness as your only defense. You are not fast enough to escape, not clever enough to outthink anything, and not built for a world that suddenly demands both. Weeks blur together, then months. Though you've long stopped keeping track. Hunger becomes normal. Fear becomes constant. And deep down, without fully understanding how, you begin to sense the truth. There are fewer of you because there are almost none of you left. One day you realize you haven't seen another dodo in a very long time. You wander slowly through what remains, pecking at whatever scraps you can find, your movements heavier than they used to be. Eventually you stop, not because you choose to, but because continuing feels unnecessary. You lower yourself to the ground, the faint warmth of the sun settling over you, and for the first time in a while, everything is quiet again. Not the old quiet. The final kind. The final kind.